A racist manager purposely makes a mess for the black cleaning lady to clean up and thinks that no one will notice. However, he is shocked when he is called into the CEO's office, and the cleaning lady is sitting with the CEO. Vanessa stepped into the gleaming lobby of Chambers Enterprises, her soft-soled shoes silent on the marble floors. The clean, minimalist design of the office building gave off an air of quiet efficiency, but she could feel the eyes of those who passed her by. They glanced quickly, their expressions indifferent but tinged with curiosity. After all, new faces in this environment were rare, especially for someone in her position. She adjusted her cleaning apron and took a deep breath. It wasn't the work that concerned her. Vanessa had worked as a cleaner for years, and she'd grown used to the way people treated her when they saw her with a mop or a vacuum. She was here to do a job just like everyone else, but this time, there was something more. She'd been briefed by Mr. Chambers himself. This job wasn't just about cleaning. She was here to observe, to pay attention, and report back. A door clicked open down the hall, and out stepped Derek Forrester, the company's middle manager. He was in his early 40s, wearing an expensive suit with his shirt collar open just enough to suggest casual power. His smile, broad and almost too friendly, greeted Vanessa as he approached. "Ah, so you must be the new cleaner," he said, extending a hand briefly before withdrawing it. "Vanessa, right? Welcome to the team. I'm Derek." Vanessa nodded, returning the smile with one of her own. "That's right. Pleased to meet you." Derek's eyes flitted over her, taking in her uniform and the tools at her side. "Well, Vanessa, I've got to say, we really appreciate what you're doing here. It's not an easy job, and I'm sure you'll find we run a pretty tight ship." He paused, glancing down the hall. "Though I have to admit, my office gets a bit messy sometimes. Long hours, lots of paperwork. But you'll keep things looking sharp, I'm sure." Vanessa's smile didn't falter. "I'll do my best. I'm sure you will. And don't hesitate to ask if you need anything," Derek added, his tone slipping into something softer, almost patronizing. "After all, we're all part of the same team here." With that, he gave her a small nod and disappeared down the hall, leaving her standing in the middle of the immaculate lobby. She didn't need to hear more to understand what Derek thought of her. The polite words, the rehearsed friendliness, it all carried the weight of something unspoken. She was here to clean up after him, and in his eyes, that was all she would ever be. Vanessa exhaled slowly, turning her attention to the task at hand. She had work to do, and this job was important, not just for her paycheck, but for something bigger. She hadn't met many people like Bill Chambers, a man with money and power who was still determined to expose the kind of quiet bigotry that existed within his own company. He had told her everything when they first met in his spacious glass-walled office 2 days ago. "I need someone who can see what I can't," Bill had said, his voice low and measured. "Derek's been with the company for years, and on the surface he's the model employee. But I've noticed things, subtle things, and I can't let that kind of attitude fester here. I need to know if he's really who he claims to be." Vanessa had agreed to help, even though she wasn't sure what to expect. Bill had made it clear she would be compensated well, but more than that, he had appealed to her sense of right and wrong. Vanessa had seen enough discrimination in her life to know what it looked like, even when it was hidden behind a smile. She pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, her eyes scanning the office as she went. For now, she would do her job quietly, watching, waiting. Derek had already shown a glimpse of the man he truly was. All she had to do was let him keep talking. As she rode the elevator up to the executive floors, Vanessa thought of her son back home. She had taken this job to make a better life for him, to give him opportunities she hadn't had growing up. But now, there was something more at stake. Bill Chambers had given her the chance to be more than just a cleaner. He'd given her the power to reveal the truth, and she wouldn't waste it. Vanessa quickly settled into her routine over the next few days. The job itself was simple enough: cleaning offices, wiping down desks, emptying trash bins. But as Bill had instructed, she kept her eyes and ears open. Every encounter with Derek became a small piece of the puzzle she was assembling, though the pieces weren't hard to find. By the middle of the week, Derek had grown noticeably more comfortable around her, and that's when the messes started. On Wednesday afternoon, as Vanessa entered Derek's office, she found his desk littered with half-eaten sandwiches, crumpled papers, and an overturned coffee cup, the dark liquid seeping into a stack of reports. His jacket was draped carelessly over the back of his chair, and a few crumbs were scattered on the floor near his chair. "Oh, hey, Vanessa," Derek said without looking up from his computer as she wheeled in her cleaning cart. "Had a bit of a spill earlier. Could you take care of that?" "Thanks." Vanessa paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the cluttered desk. She glanced at Derek, who was typing furiously on his keyboard, his focus entirely on his screen as if she were invisible. With a quiet sigh, she grabbed a cloth and began wiping up the coffee, careful to avoid the wet papers. Sorry about the mess, Derek said, still not looking at her. His voice was casual, almost dismissive. Work's been crazy this week. You know how it is, Vanessa murmured, her voice calm. She continued cleaning without a word of complaint, but inside, she could feel the weight of his indifference. He didn't care that she was here to clean up after him. In fact, it seemed like he enjoyed knowing that someone would always be there to take care of whatever mess he made. As she worked, Derek's phone buzzed, and he picked it up, turning slightly in his chair to glance at her. You know, it's great having someone around to keep things in order. I mean, no offense, but most people wouldn't do half as good a job as you, he said, his tone casual but laced with something unspoken. Vanessa straightened, meeting his gaze briefly before returning to her work. She didn't need to respond. His words hung in the air, full of the quiet superiority that came with assuming she should be grateful for the compliment. Derek turned back to his screen, apparently satisfied with himself, and Vanessa continued her work in silence. She knew that Derek's small messes were deliberate now. He would leave his trash, spill his drinks, and never once acknowledge the work she did to clean it up. And each time, he'd throw in a casual comment, as if to remind her of her place. Later that day, as she finished cleaning up another of Derek's carelessly abandoned lunches, Vanessa met with Bill in one of the small, unused conference rooms on the executive floor. Bill was seated at the long, polished table, flipping through some papers when she entered. He looked up, offering a small smile. "How's it going?" Bill asked, his voice quiet and measured. Vanessa took a seat across from him, pulling out her phone where she had been documenting Derek's behavior with photos and notes. "He's getting bolder," she said. "Messier, too. It's like he thinks I'm here just for him." Bill nodded, leaning back in his chair. "That's what I expected. And the comments? They're subtle," Vanessa replied, scrolling through her phone to show Bill the pictures she had taken of Derek's office in various states of disarray. "But they're there. He's careful not to say anything outright, but he's testing the waters." Bill studied the photos, his expression thoughtful. "Good. Keep documenting everything. Don't confront him yet. I want him to show his hand completely." Vanessa nodded, though part of her wanted to call Derek out right then and there. The way he acted, so smug in his assumption that she wouldn't push back, made her skin crawl. But Bill was right. They needed more. They needed Derek to expose himself fully, without any room for him to wriggle out of it. "I will," she said, "but it's only a matter of time before he slips. He's getting too comfortable." "That's what we're counting on," Bill said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "He won't expect you to push back when it matters most. He's already underestimated you." Vanessa felt a flicker of satisfaction at Bill's words. It wasn't often that someone like her was given this kind of trust, especially not by someone like Bill Chambers, a man who could have easily looked the other way. But he had seen the problem and was determined to fix it. The next day, Derek's behavior escalated once again. Vanessa found another mess waiting for her, this time with food wrappers tossed carelessly on the floor next to his trash can, as if he hadn't even bothered to aim. "Sorry, Vanessa," Derek said when she entered. "I've been so swamped lately I haven't had time to clean up." "You're a lifesaver, you know that?" Vanessa's hands tightened slightly around the handle of her cart. She didn't respond, keeping her expression neutral. As she bent down to pick up the trash, Derek chuckled softly. "You know, it's funny," he said, leaning back in his chair. "People think the higher up you go in a company, the easier it gets. But the truth is, it's a lot of work managing everything. I guess that's why we all have our roles, right?" Vanessa straightened, meeting his gaze. There it was again, that smug undertone, the suggestion that her role was somehow fixed, that she was exactly where she belonged. She wanted to say something, but instead, she kept quiet, reminding herself of the bigger picture. Soon enough, Derek would make the mistake Bill was waiting for. As Vanessa left Derek's office that afternoon, she couldn't help but feel the tension building. The messes were getting worse, the comments sharper, and she knew that the breaking point was coming. All she had to do was wait, and when Derek finally slipped, she would be ready. Vanessa's workday was no longer just about cleaning. Every moment had become a calculated act of observation. She entered each room with the same calm demeanor, pushing her cleaning cart in front of her like it was her shield. But inside, she was constantly thinking, analyzing every word, every glance Derek threw her way. He was slipping, she could tell, and she was ready to catch him when he finally fell. That afternoon, as soon as Derek left the office for a late meeting, Vanessa made her way to Bill Chambers' office on the executive floor. She had become accustomed to slipping into his office unnoticed, their meetings hidden from the rest of the staff. Bill was sitting at his desk when she entered, his suit jacket draped casually over his chair, eyes focused on his computer screen. He didn't look up as she closed the door quietly behind her. "How's it going?" Bill asked without turning away from his screen, his voice low and even. He clicked something on the screen and finally looked up, leaning back in his chair. His expression was calm, but Vanessa could sense the keen interest behind his eyes. Vanessa sat down across from him and pulled out her phone, scrolling through the pictures she had taken of Derek's increasingly sloppy office. "It's getting worse," she said, handing the phone to Bill. "It's like he's testing me. Every day he makes a bigger mess. And the comments are starting to get more pointed." Bill took the phone and scanned the photos, nodding slowly as he looked through each image. Coffee stains on his desk, wrappers discarded on the floor, crumbs scattered across the carpet. "He's getting comfortable," Bill said quietly. "That's good. It means he's not trying to hide anymore." "He doesn't see me as anything but the cleaner," Vanessa replied, her voice steady but sharp. "He thinks that's all I'll ever be. And he's growing bolder. The way he talks to me now, he's pushing it, just waiting for me to react." "And have you?" Bill asked, his eyes locking with hers. "No," Vanessa said, shaking her head. "I've kept it professional. But he knows I'm getting frustrated, and I think that's exactly what he wants. He's waiting for me to slip up." Bill nodded thoughtfully. "That's how it works. People like Derek, they don't just show their hand right away. They push, little by little, until they feel safe enough to say what they really think. And by then, it's too late for them to cover it up." Vanessa sat back in her chair, folding her arms across her chest. "So, what's next? How much longer do we wait?" Bill leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "We wait until he reveals enough that there's no way for him to explain it away. When he says something that crosses the line, really crosses it, we'll have everything we need." Vanessa nodded, though part of her bristled at the idea of waiting. She had already heard enough from Derek to know the kind of man he was, but Bill was right. If they wanted to make sure Derek couldn't worm his way out of this, they needed undeniable proof. And that meant letting Derek think he was in control, even when he wasn't. "I'm documenting everything," Vanessa said. "Pictures, notes, it's all here." She tapped her phone, showing Bill the detailed log she'd been keeping. Bill's eyes flicked back to the screen, nodding his approval. "Good. Keep doing what you're doing. He's going to make a mistake soon, I can feel it." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "He's going to slip, Bill. And when he does, I want to be there to see it." Bill's smile was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "Oh, you will be. Trust me." As Vanessa left Bill's office, her mind was racing. She knew that the breaking point was coming. Derek's messes were getting more frequent, his comments less guarded. He was beginning to feel untouchable, like he could say or do anything and no one would challenge him. But that was about to change. The following day, Derek's behavior escalated even further. Vanessa entered his office in the late afternoon to find the usual scene. His desk covered in food wrappers, a half-eaten sandwich perched on the edge, crumbs scattered across the floor. This time, though, there was more. A cup of coffee had been spilled on the carpet, its dark stains soaking into the fibers. Vanessa felt a surge of frustration rise in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral as she wheeled her cart into the room. "Vanessa, you're a lifesaver," Derek said as she walked in, not bothering to look up from his computer. "I swear, I don't know what I'd do without you." Vanessa began cleaning in silence, her movements methodical, but her mind was racing. How long was she supposed to keep putting up with this? She could feel Derek's eyes on her, watching her from behind his screen. He was waiting for her to react. She knew it, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. "Sorry about the mess," Derek said casually, pushing his chair back and standing up. "It's been one of those weeks. You know how it is." Vanessa paused, glancing at the pile of trash on his desk. "You could try cleaning up after yourself," she said, her voice calm but firm. She hadn't meant to say it. It just slipped out. Derek froze, his eyes narrowing slightly as he looked at her. The smile on his face faded for just a moment, replaced by something sharper, colder. "That's your job, isn't it?" he said, his tone light but with an edge. "I mean, what would you do if I didn't leave anything for you to clean up?" Vanessa met his gaze, her face unreadable. "I'd still do my job," she said quietly, "but that doesn't mean you should go out of your way to make things harder." Derek laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Well, don't take it personally, Vanessa. I'm sure you're used to this sort of thing." He turned away before she could respond, leaving her standing there in the middle of the room, her hand gripping the handle of the vacuum. Vanessa clenched her jaw but said nothing. She wouldn't take the bait. Derek was getting reckless, pushing further each day. But Vanessa knew the truth now. His downfall was inevitable. All she had to do was wait for the moment when he finally crossed the line, and she wouldn't have to wait much longer. By the end of the week, Derek's careless messes and patronizing remarks had become the norm. Each day brought a new level of disrespect, crumpled papers thrown haphazardly on the floor, half-finished meals left to rot on his desk, and the ever-present coffee spills that seemed more intentional than accidental. Vanessa could feel the tension building, not just in the air but within herself. The weight of holding back, of enduring Derek's casual cruelty, was becoming harder to bear. Friday afternoon, Vanessa entered Derek's office and immediately noticed the state of disarray. It was worse than usual. Empty takeout containers littered his desk. A greasy pizza box lay open with crumbs scattered all over the floor. A half-eaten sandwich was perched precariously on the edge of his desk, and a full cup of coffee had been knocked over, the dark liquid spreading across the floor in a slow, ominous creep. Derek sat at his desk, leaning back in his chair, feet propped up casually as he scrolled through his phone. He didn't even acknowledge her as she entered, though the smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth told Vanessa that he was aware of her presence. He was waiting for her to clean it up, as always, but this time something snapped inside her. Vanessa stopped in her tracks, the handle of the cleaning cart still in her hand. She stared at the mess for a long moment before looking up at Derek. He was relaxed, too relaxed, and it only fueled the fire that had been quietly burning inside her all week. "Derek," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you need to stop leaving your office like this." Derek's eyes flicked up from his phone, his smirk deepening into a full grin. "What's that?" he asked, his tone light and dismissive. Vanessa didn't back down. "I'm asking you to clean up after yourself," she said, the tension in her voice rising. "I come in here every day, and it's like you're deliberately making a mess just because you know I'll clean it." Derek chuckled, shaking his head as he put his phone down on the desk. "Vanessa, come on," he said, still leaning back in his chair. "Don't get so worked up. I'm sure you've cleaned up worse in your time." Vanessa clenched her jaw. She had been expecting this, his attempt to laugh it off, to make her feel small, but she wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. "I'm not asking for much," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Just a little respect. It's not hard to clean up after yourself." Derek's smile faded, his eyes narrowing as he straightened in his chair. "Respect?" he repeated, his tone sharp now. "You think you're owed respect because you clean up a few spills and pick up some trash? Let me remind you of something, Vanessa. This is your job. You should be grateful you have it." Vanessa stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't flinch, didn't break eye contact. "I'm doing my job," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "But that doesn't mean you get to treat me like I'm beneath you." Derek's expression darkened, his frustration bubbling over. He stood up from his desk, leaning forward slightly as he spoke, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're better than this? Better than me? You're here to clean up, Vanessa. That's all. You should be grateful that someone like me even gives you the time of day." Vanessa felt a wave of anger surge through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She could see it now. Derek's mask was slipping, his true self starting to show. He had crossed the line, and he didn't even realize it. "That's your problem, Derek," she said quietly, her voice steady but filled with a quiet strength. "You think you're better than everyone else. You think you're entitled to treat people like this because of your position. But I see who you really are." Derek's face twisted in anger. "Who I really am," he sneered. "You don't know anything about me. You're just the cleaner. That's all you'll ever be. And you should be grateful, because that's all your kind is good for." There it was. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, filling the room with the weight of Derek's hatred. Vanessa's chest tightened, but she kept her face calm, refusing to give him the reaction he wanted. She had known this moment was coming, and now it was here. Unbeknownst to Derek, Bill Chambers had been in the office next door, his door slightly ajar. He had heard every word. Vanessa glanced toward the door, knowing that Bill was listening. She had done her part. Now it was time for Derek to face the consequences. Without another word, Vanessa turned away from Derek and began cleaning up the mess. Derek, clearly rattled, didn't say anything either. He stood there seething, watching her as she worked in silence. A few minutes later, just as Vanessa finished wiping down the last of the spilled coffee, Bill's voice cut through the tense silence. "Derek, can I see you in my office for a moment?" Derek's head snapped toward the door, his expression shifting from anger to sudden alarm. He hadn't realized Bill was nearby. Vanessa didn't look up, but she could feel the shift in Derek's energy. He was nervous now, unsure of what Bill had heard. Sure," Derek stammered, smoothing down his shirt and trying to regain his composure. He shot Vanessa a final glare before heading toward Bill's office, leaving her alone with the remnants of his mess. As the door to Bill's office closed behind him, Vanessa allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Derek had finally crossed the line, and now there was no going back. The game was over. The game. And Vanessa knew that when the truth finally came out, she would be standing tall. Derek stepped into Bill's office, his expression carefully composed, though Vanessa could tell from his hurried steps that he was rattled. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, she stood silently in the hallway, her heart pounding, but her mind clear. This was the moment Bill had been waiting for. She had done her part. Now it was up to Bill to finish what they had started. Inside the office, Bill sat behind his large, polished desk, his demeanor calm and collected as always. He looked up as Derek entered, gesturing for him to take a seat. Derek hesitated for a moment before sitting down, his posture tense, his hands resting awkwardly on his knees. "Derek," Bill said, leaning back in his chair, "I just overheard a conversation between you and Vanessa." Derek's face remained carefully neutral, though Vanessa noticed the way his fingers twitched slightly. "Oh, just a little misunderstanding, Bill," he said with a nervous laugh. "You know how it is with the staff sometimes. Things get misinterpreted." Bill's eyes narrowed slightly, though his tone remained even. "Misunderstood? You raised your voice, Derek. It wasn't hard to hear." Derek forced another laugh, this one sounding even more strained. "Well, I didn't mean anything by it. Vanessa's just a bit sensitive, you know. I'm sure she took what I said the wrong way." Bill didn't respond immediately. He let the silence hang between them, his gaze never leaving Derek's face. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence clearly faltering. The quiet tension in the room was palpable. "Derek," Bill said finally, his voice measured, "I've known you for a long time. You've been a valuable member of this company, but I need to know the truth. What exactly did you say to her?" Derek swallowed, his eyes darting away from Bill's steady gaze for a brief moment before he plastered on a smile. "Like I said, it was just a misunderstanding. I might have been a bit frustrated, but it wasn't anything serious. Just a little workplace banter, that's all." Bill's expression remained unreadable as he studied Derek. "Workplace banter?" he repeated, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Derek fidget. Derek nodded quickly. "Yes, that's all it was. You know how things can get tense around here sometimes." "I didn't mean any harm." Bill leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk, his eyes locking with Derek's. "I thought I heard you say, that's all your kind is good for. Is that workplace banter?" Derek's face paled. For a moment, he didn't seem to know how to respond. He shifted in his seat, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. Finally, he let out a nervous chuckle. "Bill, come on, you know me. That's not how I meant it." "How did you mean it then?" Bill's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it now. "Because it sounded pretty clear to me." Derek's smile faltered completely. He glanced around the office as if looking for an escape route, but there was none. Bill's gaze was unrelenting, and the silence between them stretched on, growing heavier with each passing second. I don't know what you want me to say," Derek stammered, his voice shaky now. "It was just a bad moment, okay? I was frustrated. I didn't mean to say it like that." Bill sat back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. "Frustration doesn't excuse racism, Derek." Derek's face flushed with a mix of panic and anger. "I'm not a racist," he blurted out, his voice rising defensively. "I've worked with people of all backgrounds my entire career. I treat everyone the same." Bill raised an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. "Do you?" Derek sputtered, his mind racing as he tried to backtrack. "Look, Bill, you've known me for years. You know I don't have a problem with anyone. This is all just a misunderstanding." Bill didn't reply immediately. He let Derek's words hang in the air, as though weighing them carefully. Finally, he stood up from his desk, walking slowly around to where Derek sat. He leaned against the edge of the desk, his arms still crossed. "I'm giving you a chance, Derek," Bill said quietly. "A chance to come clean about what happened. I don't want excuses, and I don't want lies. I want the truth." Derek looked up at Bill, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. For a moment, it seemed like he might confess. His mouth opened as if to say something, but then he closed it again, his eyes flicking toward the door, toward the hall where Vanessa waited. He shook his head. "There's nothing to come clean about," Derek said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was just a bad moment." Bill's expression hardened. He pushed away from the desk, pacing slowly behind his chair. "All right, Derek, I'm going to take you at your word. For now." Derek's shoulders sagged in relief, a small shaky smile returning to his lips. "Thanks, Bill. I knew you'd understand. It's been a stressful week, that's all." Bill didn't respond. He walked to the window, his back to Derek, staring out over the city skyline. "But understand this," Bill said, his voice cold and distant. "I expect the people in my company to treat everyone with respect. And if I find out otherwise, there will be consequences." Derek nodded quickly, still rattled but visibly relieved that the confrontation seemed to be over. "Of course, Bill. Absolutely. I completely understand." Bill turned back to face Derek, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "You're dismissed for now, Derek, but remember what I said." Derek stood, practically stumbling over his own feet in his haste to leave the office. "Absolutely, Bill. I'll make sure there's no more misunderstandings." As Derek hurried out of the room, Bill remained standing by the window, his expression unreadable. The moment the door closed behind Derek, Bill let out a quiet sigh and walked back to his desk. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the polished wood, his mind already turning to what would come next. Vanessa stood just outside in the hallway, her heart still pounding from what she had overheard. She didn't move, didn't speak, as Derek stormed past her, his face red with embarrassment and anger. He didn't even look at her. The game wasn't over yet, but Vanessa knew that Bill was playing a longer game, and Derek had no idea that the final move was already in play. Vanessa arrived at the office early the next morning, her routine unchanged on the surface, but the air was different, tense. She could feel the weight of what was about to happen. Derek, oblivious as ever, sat in his office, likely assuming that the worst had passed. He had no idea what was coming. Her steps were measured as she pushed her cart down the hallway. The office was quieter than usual, but she noticed a few employees glancing her way. No one said anything, but Vanessa could sense the curiosity lingering in their eyes. She kept her face neutral. Today was not about her performance. It was about setting the stage for the moment that was about to unfold. When she entered Derek's office, the familiar scene of chaos greeted her. Coffee stains, papers scattered across the desk, a half-eaten sandwich sitting precariously on the corner, crumbs littering the carpet. It was as if nothing had changed for him. He still believed she was there to clean up his messes, literally and figuratively. "Morning, Vanessa," Derek greeted her without looking up from his computer. He typed furiously, his eyes fixed on the screen as he continued. "Made a bit of a mess again. Can you take care of it?" "Thanks." Vanessa paused, looking around the room. She noticed the crumbs under the desk, the spilled coffee near his chair. The more she cleaned for him, the more careless he became. She wasn't surprised, but today, she wouldn't just walk away quietly. Today was different. She knelt down to clean the crumbs, and as she did, Derek's phone rang. She heard his casual tone switch to forced politeness in an instant. "Hey, Bill!" Derek answered the phone, his voice now artificially bright. "What's up?" Vanessa slowed her movements, listening carefully as she continued wiping the floor. "Derek?" Bill's voice was low, but Vanessa could hear every word clearly from across the room. "I need you to come to my office. And bring Vanessa with you." There was a brief pause, and Derek's forced politeness wavered. He glanced toward Vanessa, confusion flashing across his face. "Vanessa?" he repeated, his voice stiffening. "That's right. Now, Derek," Bill said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then, with a decisive click, the call ended. Derek's eyes flicked toward Vanessa again, his expression tightening. He gave her a thin smile, though there was clear discomfort behind it. "Looks like the boss wants to see us both," he said, trying to keep his tone light, but it came off strained. Vanessa didn't respond. She simply stood up, wiped her hands on her apron, and nodded. "Let's go." They walked down the hallway together, Derek's steps slower than usual. He seemed unsure of what to make of Bill's request. His usual confidence had taken a hit, though he hadn't realized the full extent of what was happening. Vanessa kept her face impassive, her heart pounding quietly in her chest, but outwardly calm. She had waited for this moment, and now, it was here. When they reached Bill's office, the door was already open. Bill sat behind his large mahogany desk, his demeanor calm and controlled. His office was pristine, not a single paper out of place, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere hanging in the air. "Come in," Bill said, gesturing for both of them to take a seat. Vanessa walked in first and sat down, her hands resting on her lap. Derek followed, though his movements were noticeably less confident. He tried to mask it with his usual air of professionalism, but it was clear that something had shaken him. "Bill, I wasn't expecting," Derek began, but Bill raised a hand, cutting him off. "Sit down, Derek," Bill said, his voice calm but firm. Derek's eyes widened slightly, but he did as he was told, sitting in the chair across from Bill. He glanced at Vanessa, confusion clouding his expression, but she remained silent. "I called you both here today," Bill began, leaning back in his chair, "because there's something we need to discuss, something that has been happening under my nose for far too long. And I'm afraid, Derek, you're at the center of it." Derek blinked, clearly taken aback. "Bill, what are you talking about? If this is about yesterday's little misunderstanding with Vanessa, It wasn't a misunderstanding," Bill interrupted, his voice sharper now. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. "It was an incident of disrespect, of racism, and I've let you think you could get away with it for far too long." The color drained from Derek's face. "Racism? Bill, come on, that's not what happened. Vanessa and I had a disagreement, sure, but you know me. You know I'm not—" "I know what I heard," Bill said, his voice hard and cutting. "I overheard everything yesterday, and Vanessa has been documenting your behavior all week." Derek's eyes flicked toward Vanessa again, panic beginning to creep into his expression. "What?" He turned back to Bill, his voice rising in disbelief. You had her spying on me? Bill didn't flinch. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder, flipping it open in front of him. Vanessa has been keeping a detailed record of everything you've said and done. Every mess you've left. Every condescending remark. She documented it all. He slid the folder across the desk toward Derek, who hesitated before grabbing it. As Derek flipped through the pages, Vanessa could see the realization dawn on his face. His eyes scanned the photographs of his office in various states of disarray. The notes Vanessa had taken. The detailed accounts of his casual, dismissive remarks. This is taken out of context, Derek stammered, slamming the folder shut. Bill, you can't take this seriously. Vanessa's exaggerating, twisting things around. We were just having a bit of workplace banter. Banter? Bill repeated, his voice dripping with cold disdain. Telling someone that they should be grateful for their job because it's all they're good for? That's your idea of banter? Derek's face flushed with anger. I didn't mean it like that, and you know it. Bill, you've known me for years. I've worked my ass off for this company. You're going to fire me over this? Over some cleaners' complaints? Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Derek, but she remained silent. She wasn't surprised by his reaction. He had always thought of her as nothing more than the cleaner. Even now, he couldn't see the truth. I'm firing you, Bill said, standing up from his desk, his eyes blazing with anger now. Because you've disrespected this company. You've disrespected the people who work here. And you've proven that you're not the kind of person I want representing us. Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. You're throwing me away because of her? He gestured toward Vanessa, his voice rising with desperation. You're going to ruin my career over some misunderstanding? Bill didn't back down. He walked around the desk, standing directly in front of Derek. This isn't about Vanessa, he said coldly. This is about you, and the fact that you've shown your true colors, Derek. You can't talk your way out of this. Derek's face contorted with fury. You'll regret this, he spat. I've given everything to this company, and now you're throwing me away over nothing. Bill crossed his arms, his expression unmoved. Get your things, Derek. Security will escort you out. For a moment, Derek stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, his face red with anger. He looked between Bill and Vanessa, as if hoping one of them would back down, but neither did. He was finished, and he knew it. With a final glare, Derek turned and stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The room was silent for a moment after he left. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her hands resting on her lap, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. It was over. Bill turned to Vanessa, his expression softening. Thank you, Vanessa, he said quietly. I know this wasn't easy, but you did the right thing. Vanessa nodded, meeting his gaze. It needed to be done. Bill walked back to his desk, sitting down with a sigh. I'm sorry it took this long to address. I should have seen it sooner. It's not your fault, Vanessa replied. People like Derek are good at hiding who they really are, until they slip. Bill leaned forward, his elbows resting on his desk. You've done a great service to this company, Vanessa. And to yourself. You've shown us what kind of person Derek really is. And you've shown me the kind of person I want to keep around. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Bill smiled slightly. I'd like to offer you a permanent position here. Not as a cleaner, but in an administrative role. You've proven that you're more than capable of handling difficult situations, and I think you could be a valuable asset to the company in other ways. Vanessa blinked, surprised by the offer. She hadn't expected this. I don't know what to say. Take your time to think about it, Bill said, standing up again. You've earned it. Whatever you decide, just know that you have my respect, and I'll support you, whatever you choose. Vanessa stood as well, offering a small smile. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. I'll think about it. As she left Bill's office and walked down the long hallway, Vanessa felt lighter than she had in days. Derek was gone, and with him, the weight of his cruelty. She had stood her ground, exposed the truth, and now she had options. She wasn't just a cleaner anymore. She was in control, and she had earned every bit of it. Vanessa walked through the hallway of the office with a strange sense of calm. The usual background hum of conversations, the tapping of keyboards, and the whir of copiers felt distant, like white noise. Her footsteps were steady as she moved past the cubicles, nodding politely to a few employees who gave her curious glances. Word had spread fast. Everyone knew by now that something had happened, but they didn't know the details. They didn't know that Derek's time in the company was over. As she turned the corner toward Derek's office, she saw him. Derek was standing by his desk, his expression tight with barely contained fury as he stuffed papers and personal items into a box. The blinds on his office windows were half closed, casting the room in a shadowy gloom, making it feel smaller than usual. His once meticulously organized workspace was now in complete disarray, much like the man himself. For a moment, Vanessa considered walking by without saying anything. After all, there was nothing left to discuss. Nothing more that needed to be said. But as she approached, Derek glanced up and their eyes met. There was something in his expression that made her pause. Resentment. Derek's face was flushed with a mixture of anger and humiliation. His eyes burned with something deeper than just frustration. There was a bitterness there, a sense of disbelief that everything had come crashing down so quickly. Vanessa stopped just outside his office, her body still as she looked at him. She hadn't spoken to him since their confrontation in Bill's office, and the silence that hung between them now was heavy with unresolved tension. Derek's hands froze over the box, gripping a stack of papers tightly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Derek broke the silence, his voice low and laced with bitterness. "Congratulations," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "You got what you wanted." Vanessa didn't move, her face calm as she took in his words. "What I wanted," she repeated, her tone neutral. "All I ever wanted was respect, Derek." Derek scoffed, tossing the papers into the box carelessly. "Respect," he echoed mockingly. "You think this is about respect? This is about you playing the victim, making me look like the bad guy. I've been here for years, Vanessa. Years. And now I'm packing up my desk because of you." Vanessa remained unfazed, though his words were meant to sting. She stepped just inside the doorway, keeping her gaze steady on him. "You're packing up your desk because of your actions, Derek, not mine. You did this to yourself." Derek's eyes snapped up to meet hers, his face flushed with anger. "You've been gunning for me from the start. Bill put you up to this, didn't he? He set me up and used you to do it." Vanessa shook her head, her voice calm but firm. "No one set you up, Derek. Bill gave you every chance to be better. You had the opportunity to change, to treat people with decency, but you chose not to. You crossed the line, and now you're paying the price for it." Derek gritted his teeth, the box trembling slightly in his hands. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he spat. "You think just because you caught me slipping once, you're some kind of hero?" Vanessa's eyes softened, but she didn't let his venomous words get to her. "I don't think I'm better than you, Derek," she said quietly. "But I do know that I deserve respect. Everyone does. And you made it clear that you don't understand that." Derek slammed the lid of the box shut, his knuckles white as he gripped the edges. His mouth opened as if to say something else, but nothing came out. For the first time, he looked like he had truly run out of words, like he finally understood that there was no talking his way out of this. Vanessa stepped back from the doorway, giving him space. "This isn't just about what happened between you and me," she said, her voice soft but firm. "This is about how you treat people. Maybe one day you'll understand that. Maybe you won't." Derek's shoulders slumped slightly, and he let out a bitter laugh, though it sounded hollow. "So, what now?" he muttered, almost to himself. "You think I'm going to walk out of here and just disappear?" Vanessa shrugged. "That's up to you. You can learn from this, or you can stay angry. But either way, you won't be able to treat people like that anymore. Not here." Derek said nothing, his face tight with resentment. He grabbed the box from the desk and turned away, his back to her as he gathered the last of his belongings. It was clear he had nothing left to say, and Vanessa wasn't interested in dragging the conversation out any longer. She watched him for a moment, then turned to leave, walking back down the hallway with the same steady steps she had come with. As she rounded the corner, she heard the distant sound of Derek's office door slamming shut behind her. It wasn't the sound of victory. She didn't need that. For Vanessa, the victory had already been won. She had stood her ground, exposed the truth, and claimed her respect. Whatever Derek did next was his burden to carry. As she moved through the office, past the whispers and the curious glances, Vanessa felt a sense of finality settle over her. Derek was gone, and so was the weight he had imposed on her. She had endured his cruelty and his condescension, but now she was free of it. And as she continued her work, moving from office to office, she realized that she had done more than just clean up after Derek. She had cleaned out the toxicity he had left behind. In the following days, the office felt different after Derek's departure. The weight that had lingered in the air for so long seemed to have lifted, replaced by a sense of calm and quiet progress. People moved about the office with a newfound ease, their footsteps light, their interactions respectful. And though Vanessa still made her rounds with her cleaning cart, she could feel that her role in this place had changed. Later that afternoon, Bill Chambers had asked to see her. There was something final in the way he had spoken, something that suggested this meeting would be different from their previous ones. Vanessa had spent much of the day thinking about what was next. Bill had made her an offer, something she hadn't expected, but she had taken her time to consider it carefully. As she approached the executive floor, the familiar sight of Bill's office came into view. His door was open, as it often was when he expected her. Bill sat behind his desk, his usual calm and controlled demeanor in place. But today there was a warmth in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Vanessa, please come in," Bill said as she stepped into the room. Vanessa walked in and took a seat across from him. Her hands rested comfortably in her lap, but her mind was still sorting through the decision she had made. Bill looked at her with quiet curiosity, waiting for her to speak. "I've been thinking about your offer," Vanessa began, meeting his gaze, "and I appreciate it more than you know. It's not every day someone in my position gets the chance to move up in the company, but I also know that this place, it hasn't always been easy for me." Bill nodded, listening intently. "I understand. What you've been through here, especially with Derek, it wasn't right. And I can't blame you if you want to start fresh somewhere else." Vanessa considered his words carefully. She had thought about leaving, about starting over in a place where no one knew her, where she could redefine herself from the ground up. But then she thought about what she had accomplished here, how she had stood up for herself, how she had claimed her own dignity in the face of adversity. She had earned her respect in this place, and maybe, just maybe, there was more she could do here. "I've worked hard to get to this point," Vanessa said, her voice steady, "and I think there's more I can do, more I want to do. You've given me an opportunity, Bill, and I've decided to accept your offer." Bill's face broke into a genuine smile, the warmth in his eyes unmistakable. "I'm glad to hear that, Vanessa. You've shown incredible strength, and I know you'll do great things in this new role." Vanessa smiled back, feeling a sense of relief and confidence settle over her. "I've been through a lot here, but I've learned that I'm capable of more than I thought. And if I'm going to help change things, if I'm going to make sure people like Derek can't treat others like that, I think this is the place where I can do it." Bill nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly why I wanted you for this position. You've seen firsthand what needs to change, and you're the kind of person who won't back down when something needs fixing. I believe in you, Vanessa." "Thank you," Vanessa said, her voice sincere. "I won't let you down." Bill stood up and extended his hand. Vanessa rose and shook it, her grip firm and steady. The moment felt like the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, one where she would no longer be in the background, no longer overlooked. "Let's get started then," Bill said with a smile. "I'll have HR prepare everything, and we can talk more about your new responsibilities tomorrow. But for now, I hope you take the evening to enjoy this moment. You've earned it." Vanessa nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I will. Thank you, Bill." As she left Bill's office, walking through the hallways with a sense of purpose, Vanessa felt something she hadn't felt in a while. Hope. This place had been difficult, but it had also been a place where she had grown, where she had discovered her strength. Now, with a new role ahead of her, she knew she could make a real difference. When she stepped into the elevator and watched the floors disappear behind her, Vanessa allowed herself a small smile. She had fought hard to get here, and now she was ready for whatever came next. She wasn't just the cleaner anymore. She was a leader, someone who had earned her place in this company. The elevator doors opened, and Vanessa stepped out into the crisp afternoon air. The city stretched out before her, full of new possibilities. And this time, she would face those possibilities not as someone who quietly endured, but as someone who had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her future. As she walked down the bustling streets, Vanessa knew one thing for sure. She was ready. Ready to lead, ready to make her mark, and ready to show everyone that she was more than they had ever expected. This was just the beginning.